Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello and welcome to the show. Cannon Carr and Claudia Betting are with you. In this episode, you're going to hear how you can succeed as an entrepreneur in your second career, as well as how to uniquely differentiate how you connect with people and build trust in the process. Claudia, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, today we have Michelle Prince on the podcast. She started her career at Zig Ziglar and then had a corporate career in IT consulting. After an epiphany at a conference, Michelle wrote her own book, which led her to motivational speaking and coaching. From there, it evolved into Performance Publishing, a partner publishing company that helps professionals become authors and tell their stories through self-publishing.
As you listen to the episode, we want to point out three things to keep in mind. The first one is around that process of going from corporate world to being an entrepreneur. And there are a variety of ways to do it. Michelle has a wonderful articulation about her own journey there, and you can see the process underneath and see if you can relate to it as you go on that journey yourself. Secondly, we often hear about how passion is not the key to success as an entrepreneur. You got to have the passion, but there's got to be so much more. And Michelle does a wonderful way of articulating how it's not what you were doing, but it's how you were doing it that matters. And heads up, she had to learn the hard way and shares us in that story about how she came to that realization. And third, Michelle does a wonderful job of telling us why uniquely telling your story is important to being a business owner and some of the tools you can use to do it. So Claudia, this is a great episode and we hope you all enjoy it. Sit back and listen to our conversation with Michelle Prince. Well, Michelle, so excited to have you on the show. We're going to get into your own story about how you became an entrepreneur, how you started and founded two publishing companies, and how you've been a coach to many and get your thoughts on business ownership. But first, I thought we would start with just the simple question: did you always want to be an entrepreneur as you got started?
The answer is a resounding no.
Okay.
I remember a day when I literally said to someone, it could have been my husband or my brother, that I would never want to own my own business. I was in sales my entire career, and there was a period of my life when I thought, no, I kind of like this gig, if you will. But then famous last words, as soon as you get a taste of entrepreneurship, you're like, well, gosh, I would never go back. Ever.
Right. Well, so tell us a little bit then in that preparation. So you were in the corporate world in sales and quite successfully for a number of years. How did that prepare you for entrepreneurship, and what was that point that made you jump over?
Well, I did something a little bit backwards. I started my career with my dream job, which most people kind of work up to it. But practically my first job out of college was working for Zig Ziglar. And that was a dream of mine. I loved it. I was passionate about what I was selling. I've always been in sales. And then I left intentionally to take another job in, it was IT outsourcing, technology outsourcing at first, and then eventually led me into software sales. And there was a point in my life, I had a dream of climbing a corporate ladder. I thought that, the more, to be honest, the more money, the more prestige, the more opportunity, the happier I would be. And what I realized is that was not the case for me at all. And, I learned, I'm so grateful for all those years in corporate America. I was in it for a long time because I learned the importance of, first of all, culture, the people you surround yourself with, and just, not being stuck in a box. And I was stuck in a box for a really long time.
Right. So at some point it dawned on you, the dream in the corporate world wasn't really syncing with you, and you were kind of stuck in a box and you wanted to do something different. So take us to that moment then where you said, all right, I want to get into doing something for myself. How did that transition happen?
So like I mentioned in the beginning, I didn't really have this intention ever to start my own business. But I'll never forget it. It was in 2008. I went to a conference in Dallas where one of my friends was speaking. And so I just went to support her, to be there for her, really no intention for myself. But I'm sitting in the back of the room listening to one of the speakers. And, for years secretly, Cannon, I had thought to myself, I would love to speak. There were three words that always came to mind: motivate, inspire, and encourage. That's what I wanted to do. I was selling software. I wasn't doing that. And in this conference, I just had this aha moment of, well, why don't I tell my story? And I'll back it up a little, because for those years that I thought about it, I would say to myself, no, who do you think you are? Working for Zig Ziglar, I would compare myself. As soon as I'd get a little bit of confidence to say, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to tell my story, I would shut myself down and say, well, no, you're not. Who cares about your story? You're no Zig Ziglar. But in this conference, I just had this epiphany moment, and instantly I remember thinking, I know exactly what my story is. Because for a while there, I was like, well, I don't have a story. Who am I? And then it just hit me that, yes, I do. And I decided in that moment I was going to write a book, but for nobody else but my children. I have two boys who are now adults, but they were in kindergarten and second grade at the time. And I thought, you know what? I want them to know my story. And it's no big story. It's just the things that I've learned through life I wanted to document. And so I made a decision at that point to write the book. Never did it even occur to me what would happen after publishing a book, because I unintentionally started a business because I wrote a book, not the other way around.
That's interesting. Right. So you went through your own journey as an author or becoming an author. But there wasn't a business around it at that point, right? You were still working in the corporate world.
No, not at all. And in fact, this is a funny story. I remember the first two things that happened after we launched my book, and and that was a long story I won't get into, but it took me a while to get there. But then two things happened. One, I would get asked to do some speaking, mostly locally. And then a couple of people would reach out to me for coaching. And this is how much I really hadn't thought this through, Cannon. I had a woman who bought my book reach out to me asking to hire me as her coach. And I literally said, well, I don't do coaching. I mean, I just wrote a book. I still had my software sales job.
Yeah.
And she literally was convincing me to give me money. And I'm like, and I literally said to her, why would you pay me to coach you when everything I would tell you is in the book you already have? And that's when it kind of clicked for me that, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here. But it was still, entrepreneurship is not an overnight creation, right? So it took me a while to build what eventually is my full-time business. And I've never looked back now, but it was a lot of apprehension, and just, I didn't know what I was doing when I started.
Well, it's awesome. And we'll get to that point of those transitions, right? Well, a little bit later in our discussion about those transitions and how you handled them. But I am curious, did you, when you did start various things, you have performance publishing, you have, your own workshops, your own coaching, you're sought after speaker, all that now in hindsight looks obvious, but did you start out just starting each of those on your own, or were you able to acquire some pieces of it and this and that and part of the Ziglar network?
So what happened was in 2009, I published my first book. It was within the next month I had speaking opportunities. And so Prince Performance Group began in 2009. And it literally was just speaking and training and coaching. And the question I would always get when I would be out speaking was, can you help me with my book? Because I want to write a book. I don't know where to start. And little by little, that gradually became performance publishing in 2010, where I just said, you know what, this isn't rocket science. If I can do this, you can do this. Let me teach you everything I know. And it started with a conference. The first one had 12 people in 2010 called Bookbound. And that grew to, a 3-day conference 4 times a year since then. And, it was nothing I could have imagined. There was even a point in my career, Cannon, or in the early years of publishing, and I'm thinking, how did I get here? I never set out to help people with books. My English teachers in high school would be laughing if they knew. But
was English not your favorite subject?
No. And I wasn't, I always read nonfiction, and I love professional development type books, but it really came out of, this is what I just went through myself. It's not as hard as you think. Let me show you. And then that is what took off in 2010 and to today, performance.
Right. And so I love that, where you started, 12 people were in your first session. Now you've coached thousands and you've helped thousands write books, and it's an awesome story. So, so take us back. So 2010, at that time when you started it, did you have kind of a definition of success? And if so, what was it? And how has that evolved over the past 15 years?
My definition of success in that stage, and for a couple of years to come, was really truly just motivational speaking. I wanted to keynote large conferences. I did not embrace the publishing as much as you would have thought I would in the beginning. It was more just to help people versus seeing it as a true revenue stream. It was, but if somebody were to ask me what I did, I would tell them I'm a motivational speaker. Oh yeah, and I sometimes help people to do books. That has shifted completely. So that was a big transition for me to move from, okay, wait a minute, this is a true legitimate business. And then my definition of success really evolved, but it was absolutely the first several years. It had nothing to do with publishing books. It had everything to do with speaking, motivating, inspiring, and encouraging others. And that's it.
Right. So the book publishing side, did that come about because you saw a market need where, in fact, you could pick up those passions that you have, which is motivate, inspire, help someone be their best selves? And that's in my impression, just what you're all about. You've helped us with that. You've helped me with that, right? So, how did the publishing side just meet a market need? Is that how it came about?
It did. And I wish I could tell you I had the strategy behind it, that I was going after an untapped market at the time, but it was accidental in that people would just ask for help and I would just offer to help. Now, I remember the very first book we published, I did feel like, I had all of my own resources. I had my own editors, my own cover designers, my own everything. And one of the things I didn't mention is when I published my first book, I knew nothing about publishing, but I was fortunate to have some connections through some Ziglar friends of traditional publishers. And I went down that path. I actually met with 2 different publishers, not to say they were willing to pick me up, although one was. And when I looked at the contract and realized, wait a minute, I'm doing all the work to write the book. It's my story, and I'm giving you 85 to 90% of the profit, and you're not marketing it. You're relying on me to do that, and you own the rights. Why would I do that? So I learned everything I could about self-publishing at that stage because my first book I self-published. Then when I opened the publishing company, that's when I became more okay, how can I do this for others? And then that's when we recreated the group, the team that was actually producing these books for people. But it was very organic. It was not a creation in advance and then they came. It was built as there was opportunity in front of me.
Well, some entrepreneurs call it listening to the business, listening to the market, listening to yourself, and it is that journey that you went on. Before we leave this part, I'm just curious, looking back on it, then what about the corporate world where you said, all right, at some point I feel pigeonholed, but it did prepare you well. What were those 1 or 2 things that you brought with you from the corporate world into entrepreneurship that helped you?
Being in sales, it was discipline and drive. Anyone who's in sales, in order to be successful, you have to have that internal motivation. So from the moment I started a business, there was never a question of, would I make it happen? I knew I would. It took me a little longer than I thought. I'm not going to lie, because I knew nothing about running a business. That's a whole other story. But I had some pitfalls along the way, but that really taught me, what else it really taught me though, and this is going to sound negative, but there was so much toxicity in the environment that I came from. There was a lot of just unnecessary competition and just toxic people. And I walked out of that thinking, I am never going to surround myself with people who don't share similar visions again.
Oh, yeah.
It literally was soul crushing to do some of the work that I was doing. My last role, and this has nothing to do with gender, but I will say in my last role, I was one of very, very few women in the company. And it was just a very top heavy, if you will. And I remember feeling just kind of like pushed down. And so leaving corporate, I took that with me. And I know it sounds negative, but it was actually very positive. And I don't work with clients that I don't feel I can really, that I am in alignment with. I don't have teammates that are, because I get to choose having my own business. And I did not get to choose working for somebody else.
Well, that power of choice is so important. And, I remember just one of my mentors and successful entrepreneurs said, one of their values is to work with people who respect the work they do. And
Yeah.
if it's not a fit, and it's toxic or whatever, don't do it. Right. And you've lived that and done that. And I think that's just such a powerful message to have the courage to choose to do that.
I don't know that
It's
I would
awesome.
have, I really don't know if I would have even known that had I
Hmm.
not started my career in such a positive place with Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
Being surrounded by people who did uplift you, and then to leave that to go into the true corporate environment
You
was a
saw
shift.
what you lost. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, you've said a couple things that I want to do come back to on your own story, but for as an entrepreneur, but I do want to pick up on the theme you've talked about in helping entrepreneurs succeed. And you went on your own journey writing a book, and now you're helping others write a book, but more broadly, tell their story. And I want to learn a little bit about just why is it important for a business owner or an entrepreneur to choose to do that, to tell their own story? What is the power of that?
It's huge because we do business with people we know, like, and trust. We've heard it a
Hmm.
100 times, but it's true. We all have a choice. If you're buying a house, you have a choice in realtors. If you're buying a car, you have a choice. If you're working with a financial wealth management company, you have a choice. And so
Hmm.
we tend to go with the people that we align with in values, in so many different things. And some of it is just gut instinct. So the reason I tell people to tell their stories, first and foremost, as a business owner, is that's how you connect. And you're doing it through your website, you're doing it through one-on-ones, you're doing it through so many different ways. But a book makes it easy for your client or potential, client to say, I want to work with you. It just allows them to get to know, like, and trust you that much faster. And there's also the authority element. There is, without question, an authority that comes as a published author. I won't say it's always deserved, but it is. You can't deny the fact that when you are published, you have a credibility and an authority status unlike anything else.
Hmm.
And that also opens the eyes to the people that may work with you, because we all want to work with the best. And when you're
Yeah.
the author of the book, they assume you are.
Do you find that approach works better for some industries and certain types of personalities, or can it work across all industries and all personalities?
I would have maybe had a different answer in 2010. Now I've been
Mhm.
in every industry. It works across the board. We did a project for a group of carpet cleaners. Carpet cleaners. Now, when
Mhm.
you and I go clean our carpets, we're not really looking for I mean, right? It's a different
Yeah.
purchase. Say a wealth.
Selection criteria, right? Yeah. Do you need the best? No, let's just get it
Yes.
done, right?
But you
Yeah.
know what? Even in that industry, and I mean, no disrespect to that, but that's a consumer-led industry. And they leveraged it by giving it to their referral sources, to giving it this book, and it became their business card book. So to answer your question, I think it works in every industry. I think the industries that are not using it, by now, most industries over the last, I'd say, 10 years or so, have really understood the power of a book and
Mhm.
have brought that into their marketing plan. The industries who have not yet and are listening to this, you need to jump on this now before
Yes, you
everyone
do.
else does it, because soon it will be all over your industry as well.
Well, you've encouraged me to get out there and tell my story and write a book, and and I can see the power of it. I'm in the process of it. It's intimidating, right? But you learn and you see the benefit of it down the road, and you keep on with it, and so it's amazing. Well, let me ask when we talked a little bit about who should write that book. When should they do it? When is the optimal time in your own entrepreneurial journey to do that?
The answer that most people think it should be is once you've hit the pinnacle of success, once you've reached a height. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about building authority, right? And positioning yourself as an expert in your field. So the sooner the better. In fact, don't wait until you have it all figured out, because that's a totally different book. uh, when you start a business, you are looking to invest in marketing, and of all different types, from social media to ads to maybe you're leveraging speaking to do this, whatever those areas of marketing. This is a marketing tool, and so if you can look at a book as a tool just for differentiation, I'd say as soon as you start a business, do it.
Mhm.
My story again, I didn't have a business, wrote a book, and then all of a sudden it took off. It was the opposite. I wrote a book and accidentally fell into a business because of the authority that comes with it. I used to joke with people that I knew, and I'd say, this is crazy because I'm the exact same person the day before I wrote my book, and I'm the exact same person today. But all of a sudden, people think I'm worthy to be paid to say what
Mhm.
I was already saying, or hiring me to coach them when I was already helping them. So sooner rather than later, and
Yeah.
again, because the market or the publishing industry has shifted dramatically. I've been in it 15 years, or 14, I should say. It has dramatically changed in the last 5 years,
Mhm.
even more so than when I started, because now everyone realizes the power of a book. So I almost think that if you don't have one, you're positioning yourself also in a different light. It's about, do you really believe that you're the expert in what you do? And if you do, you need to put it out there in a way to make it easy for people to agree with you. And that's with a
Yeah.
book.
That's wonderful. And I can attest from my own journey, writing that book, you are the expert, but writing the book helps you solidify that expertise as well. So it's actually a very productive process that just kind of, yes, we believe we're the expert, but this actually kind of proves to yourself, right? You're the expert. So
Yeah.
it's great. Well, you writing a book got you your business, which is a phenomenal story in itself. Since then, you've written many books. I mean, how give one or two stories how that has propelled your career?
Well, my first book, you know that story, Unintentional. My second book, I wrote very intentionally. At this point, this was in about 2011, I was actively speaking, and I really wanted to leverage more speaking, get higher speaking fees, and more into corporate. And so I wrote a book specifically on a topic I knew very, very well, but I positioned it in a way to get me more talks. And that was called Busy Being Busy, but Getting Nothing Done. And it was all about time management, productivity, priority management, and just how to get more done in a day in business leadership and life. And so that book opened up opportunities for me specifically in the area of speaking and training. The other books I've written since, I've written many books. I've done about 6 total of my own books, and then I've done an additional 12 where I've brought other authors into my books,
Yeah.
collaborative books. So each one has its own power to it, but all of them have it just builds on it. So for example, the last 3 books that I've written are all focused on your story and sharing your story. One of the books is called The Power of Authority, and it's a play on words. You can't spell authority without author. So it's all about how business owners really can leverage author status to build their business. Whereas my last book was really more faith-based. It's all the same thing, though. It's all around story, and we connect through story. So why not leverage that in your business as well?
Yeah, no, the power of story is amazing, and you're illustrating that and helping others illustrate it. So it's great. All right, so let's shift now back to Michelle, the entrepreneur and business owner. And you'd mentioned it, like the publishing industry's changed, particularly a lot in the last 5 years. Disruptions happen, right? And they sometimes change the best laid plans. I'm curious, just so in your 15-year journey, thinking back on it, were there one or two challenges that you didn't see coming that happened, and what were they, and how did you navigate them?
The early challenges I did not see because I wasn't prepared to run a business was believing that just because you have a passion for something, you'll be successful in business. That's just
Hmm.
not the case. It was, I got into a lot. I'll be straight up honest. I mean, I got into debt my first 2 years of running a business because I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't look at the numbers. Crazy as that sounds, I don't know why, but I'm a salesman, so I just focused on if I can just sell, sell, sell. Well, the honest truth, my biggest wake up call was when I read the E-myth that just because you're passionate about something does not mean you'll be successful in a business. And most businesses fail in the first 5 years. So getting past that first 5 year mark was huge for me. But I'll be very transparent in this. There's always ups and downs in business. I will say the last 18 to 24 months has been the most interesting for me in the publishing side of the business. I still do a lot on the speaking and training. And that is one, I mean, competition is everywhere. And I welcome competition because I am not a fit for everyone. And so there's room for all of us. But I think just the nature of the market, the economy, the state we're in so many different ways has paralyze business owners. I've noticed this, to not make decisions when it comes to really stepping out and building their brand.
Hmm.
Prior to the last 24 months, I would say there was a little bit more. So that's been surprising to me. that on top of, and I welcome technology. So AI, I think some people are really afraid of it. I love it and
Mhm.
encourage it, but it shifts publishing quite a bit. And there's so
Mhm.
many things that in the past had to be outsourced and had to be, and because people had no idea where to start. Whereas now there is more and more technology, there's information out there for more and more people to do it. So that has shifted my thinking as well. And I literally was just having this conversation with a client yesterday. I just want people to get their story out and leverage it. I love helping people to discover their story, frame it up, outline it, get it moving. You have to then go to publication, which is the production of the book. So many ways to get there.
Yeah.
Self-published, hybrid, published, traditional. At the end of the day, you get the exact same result. So you just have to think about your time and your money and what's worthwhile there. But then there's the last part of it that I am more passionate about now more than I was a few years ago, and that's beyond the book. Because you
Mhm.
can write a great book, you can have an amazing story, you can have it published to the nth degree, and it looks fabulous and sell less than 500 copies in a lifetime, because that's what the first time average author sells.
Yeah.
And so it's the launching of the book. It's well, what else are you going to do with it around the message? And so talking about shifts, that's where I see myself kind of on the front end and also on the back end. Of course, we're still doing publishing and production, but that's just one small piece of it. It's all
Mhm.
the other pieces, they have to come together. And more important now than ever.
Yeah. So disruption happening before our eyes, right? It happens in every industry. And is that, and I mean, we can pick up on that thing, but I wanted to go back to even in that starting point with you where you took on a lot of debt. A lot of entrepreneurs and business owners first time do that. And then they wake up one morning and they're like, oh, wow, I wish I thought through this a little bit more. How did I get hijacked by my financial situation in my business in particular? How did you work through that? Because as you know, a lot of what we preach is having liquidity, which gives you options.
Yeah.
Um, in hindsight, was that period where you had debt? Was it were you squeezed financially? How did you have options to navigate out of that?
It was a horrible time. I remember my promise I made to my husband
Yeah.
when I first decided to write a book. And mind you, this coming from a person who never had a dream to be an entrepreneur comes to my husband and said, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to start speaking and I'm going to do this and this. And I want to quit my job. And of course, his eyes were like, oh my gosh,
He's like, you want to do what? Yeah.
hyperventilating. And I made a promise to him. I said, look, I am going to do this. And I knew myself that I'll figure it out. I'll find a way. But I promised him I would never tap into our own personal
Mhm.
savings or our own personal finances for this
Right.
dream of mine.
Okay.
And I did. But you know what I found was credit cards. And I found, I found the money. But what I didn't realize is how quickly that adds up. And so to sit there and look up one day and realize how much debt I had in the business, but that comes back to us personally, it was crumbling. Like I really did not know what to do. And that's when I just started realizing I got to figure this out. And that's when I started reading books. The E-Myth really was a huge pivotal point for me, realizing that I hadn't really been looking at my numbers. I was
Mhm.
avoiding them. And that changed. And I had to make some decisions. I had brought on some team members that I couldn't afford, but I didn't know it because I wasn't really looking at the numbers. So I had to let go of some people. I had to pull back drastically, and I had to create a plan to pay off that debt, which I did. But it took time. It took time, and it's really some. You know what? I think Zig probably said it originally, but somebody reminded me of it around this period of time, because I think one of the reasons I also struggle with money is my heart was in helping people. It still is. And I would do it for free. I mean, I
Mhm.
literally would be like, yes, let me just tell you how to write a book. Oh, let me do this. Oh, I'll come speak to you. But then somebody reminded me that if you want to help a lot of people, the more money you make, the more people you can help. So it
Mhm.
was just a shift also in mindset that just because you love what you're doing doesn't mean that you shouldn't charge a good amount for it. And so that was also a big pivot for me. And I just got serious in my business. I stopped playing business and I got serious in business.
Yeah. Wow. No, amazing transformation. So broadening the lens a little bit, because you do work a lot with entrepreneurs and business owners who do help them tell their stories. Do you see a similar trend there where they don't think enough about how they're going to exit the business? They don't, they follow their passion, but they don't think enough about either personal liquidity or don't think enough about the numbers and ultimately how they're going to make this work. Broaden that lens. Do you see that more than we would?
It's interesting. So somebody investing in themselves to do a book, they're past that first 5 years in business, right? They have to have the finances in order to fund more marketing and authority building. So they're in that next part of it, right? Which is the building of the business. There's the scale and then there's the sell. There's survival, then scale, then sell. And so most of the ones that we're working with are in that scale to sell. But I will tell you, Canon, not as many people, I don't think, are thinking about, very similar to myself, actually, in that you're just so much running a business, and you just don't look up long enough to think about what if. I had a great example of this to really evaluate even how I was thinking. Was my brother and my father had a business for years. They had an IT consulting company. And one day my brother, and doing exactly like the rest of us, they're just working and churning and building and growing and all that. But my brother was smart enough to stop one day and go to my dad and say, what would you sell for? And they made a number. And then for the next couple of years, they literally, every decision they made was to get to that number to sell. And they did. And my dad wrote a book about it called Acquired. And
wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I've encouraged everyone in my family, except for my husband so far, knock on wood, to write a book. And that was the one my dad wrote for us as the kids and the grandkids, to teach us how to sell a business.
Yeah.
So I hadn't even thought of it before then. Like, what do you mean you can sell of course you think it. One of the things I love with what you all are doing is educating people that first of all, it's possible. It may not be the final outcome, but you have to have, whether you sell it to someone else or keep it for yourself, you have to have the liquidity, though, to make decisions. You can't just be going and making, nothing wrong with a lifestyle business if that's the intention of it. But I think stepping back and thinking, well, what do I want to do with this business?
Yeah.
Scaling, selling
liquidity gives you options. So you don't have to do certain things, particularly when disruptions happen, like you've talked about, right? And going back where you woke up and you're like, wow, all right, too much debt is going to limit the options I have if the less liquidity I have. And then, and now I think you're in a much better place, but yeah, your industry is being disrupted. There are going to be things beyond your control. Revenue may soften or this or that year. And, how do you navigate that? Well, unless you're a Hollywood entrepreneur who can sit in the basement and build something for an IPO, your navigation to exit has all kinds of surprises, and liquidity is what often saves you and will give you a premium on exit. So, yeah.
And I love that you talk about disruption, because everyone avoids it. Everyone thinks it's not going to happen. It will happen. It is happening in all industries. And if it hasn't happened in yours yet, it will,
Yeah. Oh, it's coming. Right.
But how you look at disruption, if we welcome disruption as an opportunity to reevaluate and pivot. I mean, at the end of the day, what is business is finding a problem, solving the problem, and then telling people what you did is how you build your authority. I mean, that is literally business, right? So
that's awesome. Yeah.
If you pivot, so maybe your disruption I'm doing this every day in my own business. I'm pivoting all the time of, okay, if this is changing, how do I change? There's still going to be problems to solve. It just may not be the exact problem, maybe a little bit different.
Right. Well, and that's such a wonderful frame of mind, right? Some people, when disruption happens, sometimes people, like you mentioned earlier, get paralyzed.
Yes.
And they're afraid to make a decision because there's uncertainty, and we all get that, right? But at the same time, like you're saying, there's an opportunity there to pivot and adapt, and that's what you have to do. You also mentioned you welcome competition, and I think the reason you welcome it is because it keeps you alive. It keeps you adapting. It keeps you relevant.
Industry.
What's that?
It legitimizes the industry and the need for it. The more competition.
So embrace the challenge. And so your mindset there with again, just that concept of liquidity, which I think so many business owners underestimate, gives you that time to figure it out, as opposed to rushing and panicking and selling, because you have to, and not because it's optimal for you to do so. So, wow, you've articulated that perfectly. So awesome. Just last question on that front. When you do think about, because we often talk about separating we think about independence from the business for the business owner because they're so intertwined. What does financial independence mean for you when you think about that?
That is a great question. And I've been thinking about this. I really have two businesses. It's all under one umbrella. There's the publishing and then there's the speaking and the training. I can't see myself ever not wanting to share personally on a stage. That's just something I just love to do, or on a
You're
webcast.
natural. Yeah.
It's just my passion. It's in my DNA.
Yeah.
But the idea of building something else, an asset, whether it be the publishing company or something else that we're creating to sell, is very attractive to me. In fact,
Yeah.
because I love to work, and I'm one of those people that I can't imagine myself just being retired and idle. I wouldn't be, because I'm a creator. I've always be creating, but
Yeah.
to not have the day in, day out management of a business, and really just focusing on the things that you love to do versus have to do is very, very, very appealing.
Yeah.
And I know it is everybody. Who wouldn't want that, right? But
Yeah. That's why I love our conversation, because they're organic. But because exit, a lot of people think exit means I'm out completely. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that, right? But it does mean transition, right? Because like you say, I think you were one who told me, like at some point you're going to exit your business whether you want to or not, right? I mean, it's just the way life happens. But exit can mean a lot of different things. And if you plan ahead, like you were talking about, your passion will keep you in the game, no question. But at some point, maybe someone else runs the business and you need to have a successor. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean you're completely out. Oh, it could. But thinking through that's so valuable. But your DNA is to do what you're doing, and I agree with you. I don't ever see you separate from that. But you need those mechanisms to let others run the business ultimately if it's going beyond you.
Yeah.
And that's what I think many entrepreneurs don't think when they're particularly in those first survival years and even in the scaling years. They're working in the business so much and not so much on it, and they're not thinking about ultimately how can they be independent from it.
Yeah. And I think most of it is just not the awareness of what's possible, because when you're starting a business or in that scale stage, I mean, you're still struggling in many fronts. So the idea of, wow, exiting a business in a positive way is like, is that even possible for me? So I think what you're doing to educate people on that, and the reality of it is possible, but you do have to put a plan in place. It's just educating people to get to that point, so they realize what they can be shooting for versus just working for the sake of working.
Yeah, awesome. Well, as we wrap, I'm just curious. I mean, I often like to hear, what do you wish you knew then when you started versus now that you know what you know now? Or what advice would you give to an entrepreneur who's looking to tell their story? And I think you've kind of highlighted that well. But between those two, how would you like to give some advice to either someone who's starting a business and benefiting what you know now, what you wish you'd known then, or just telling their own story?
I alluded to this already with the struggles I had in the beginning, but I do wish I knew when I started the importance of your numbers. I really underestimated being such a sales-minded person. I looked at the revenue coming in. I didn't necessarily look at the whole P&L. The importance.
Such a great point. Yeah.
You don't have to be an accountant to get this right, but you do have to be involved. My friend Howard Partridge always says, look at them every single day, which I was like, what? Too, because that's not what I liked to do. Get good at it and get liking it if you really want your business to grow. So that's one piece of advice.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and not just because I help people with books, but don't underestimate the power of business and being an entrepreneur. It's all about what you put out into the world, and people will always believe what you put out there. So if you put out there that you want to serve people, that you're the best at what you do, you have the heart to help people, make it easy for your clients. I do believe a book is one of the best ways to do that, but it's not the only way.
Mm-hmm,
a podcast is a great way, like you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting in front of groups, talking to them, networking with other people, but don't be your best kept secret. You don't ever want to hear that from someone. Oh my gosh, you're the best kept secret. That's, as a business owner, we have to be, if we're truly passionate about what we do, we have to be talking about it. It's not prideful. It's truly serving. Sales is service. So if we can serve someone quicker, better, faster by letting them know how we work and how we can help them, then we're serving them. So I think position yourself as the authority sooner rather than later. Don't wait till you have it all figured out to see yourself as the authority. The authority, again, I'll make it simple, but it's, I was here and now I'm here. I was struggling and now I'm not, or I was struggling and I'm not as struggling as much, right? It's just, if there's a little step in between where you started and where you are, and you could turn around and help somebody with that in between, that is what makes you the authority to that person in that moment. So
that's such a wonderful, wonderful mindset there. And, you know, some business owners love going out and telling their story, fine, but many of them are more either not introspective, but just, you know, they're like, you know, I don't feel comfortable going out and telling my story. And I love what you said. You know, if you stay a secret, nobody's going to ever benefit from your expertise. And don't let your story, don't let your expertise be a secret, right? It's going to help someone. And your mindset there, sales is service, is exactly right.
In our country, small business owners, we are the lifeblood. We have to succeed. And so this is what this is what we're all about. And so again, let's do what you can to position yourself so people can do business with you and see you as the authority that you already are.
Yeah. Well, I've loved our collaboration for that reason. I mean, you're helping us be better, but at the same time, you're making it a broader mission too, right? And I love that. You know, who doesn't want to be part of a broader mission, make the world a better place? So I love that. Well, what if people want to learn more about the variety of things you do, whether it's workshops to explore writing a book, to actually do the publishing of the book, to engaging with you as a thought leader and speaking? What's the best way for people to learn about what you do?
Sure. So performancepublishinggroup.com is everything we do on the publishing front. And you can do a strategy call with a publishing expert if you just want to kick around some ideas, but performancepublishinggroup.com. And then on the training speaking, there's a lot that I've been doing with companies. Maybe it's to help their executives to tell their stories, to build their thought leadership, to helping them to just better communicate. And that is at princeperformance.com, princeperformance.com.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great, fun conversation as always. I love being able to. I mean, you and I've spoken in the past, and I always wanted to just press record, right? So we've gotten to do that again this morning. But thank you for being on the show. I will say, I think your English teachers would be so proud from way back when, where they would have said, "What? No, there's no way she's going to write a book. She can't, you know." Gosh, you've done that, and at the same time, you're not only helping people tell their story, but you're helping transform lives and people's success stories, and it's just wonderful to see. So we'll keep that going. But thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Of course.
I love working with you as well. This has been fun. And so thanks for having me, Cannon.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We will talk soon. All right. Welcome back to the studio. Claudia, another great episode. Michelle just does a wonderful job on so many fronts about telling her story, but telling it in a way that helps you make good decisions. Mm-hmm. We, of course, have 3 or 4 takeaways. But first, I'm just always curious, what did you think of the program?
I love talking with Michelle. She's always fantastic. She really knows what she's talking about. And one of my favorite things that I feel like you always get out of a conversation with her, and especially as demonstrated here, is she just has perfect little quips of knowledge. Yeah. She's always, I feel like calling them catchphrases isn't necessarily the right word, but she's so knowledgeable, and she does such a great job of making it concise and sharing it with everyone. Yeah. And, you know,
do you remember 1 or 2 of the catchphrases you liked?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorites is, competition legitimizes your industry. I love that one. Yeah. Don't be a best kept secret. You know, I love that one. She has so many that, it's hard to pick.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of technical people in their work, keep themselves a secret kind of by accident. They don't learn to tell their story, which is a key part we'll cover here. I love those points. That's great. Well, the first main thing I thought we'd take away is in that concept of that process of going from the corporate world to the entrepreneurial world. Some people take on their corporate job knowing exactly what they want out of it, right? To become that entrepreneur at some point 8-10 years down the road. Others have no interest or clue they're going to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. And they kind of meander into that path. And Michelle did that latter one, right? Where she didn't intend to be an entrepreneur, but evolved into it. And you don't want to overdo it, but there are basically 3 steps in that process, even that one, of that accidental discovery. You know, the first one is that awakening where you hear the call and you finally decide to answer it, right? And so many people on our podcast in our various podcasts have talked about that. And you realize there's a gap, all right? So you've got your purpose, but there's a gap relative to what you're doing now. Secondly, it often starts with side gigs after you get that purpose, right? And your side gig, you're just kind of learning to define what you're doing. You scope it out, it evolves. And then third, you finally commit with confidence and maybe some business behind you. So, wonderful. I know Michelle's own journey mirrored that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she says how she never imagined herself as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and she just kind of knew she wanted to help people and do motivational speaking and publishing a book just for her sons. And it led her to this wonderful business of performance publishing and becoming a motivational speaker. And so it's really interesting to hear how that really helped shape her journey.
Yeah, into forming the book publishing she has. So, if you're thinking about the same thing, maybe this knowledge helps you accelerate your journey, but
Right.
it is a journey. It has to be authentic, and you have to learn your purpose and develop the business around it. But listening to Michelle's story may hopefully awaken some things for you. Secondly, we spent some time talking about the concept of what is less important than how, right? We talked about, she'd referenced Michael Gerber's book, E-Myth, which is a great book, and where, why do businesses fail, and the technical expertise is often something that gets somebody started, but they fail, right? Because it's not a business built around it. But so it's more about not what, but how.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes me reflect on Scott Regan's podcast, where you want to help people. And that's really why you start your business, is because you love helping others and filling a void. But you have to be fully aware of your financial picture. And that's something that Michelle talks about lacking. She comes from sales, so she knew her revenue, but she didn't quite look at the entirety of that financial picture. And that's so important as a business owner, because that's really when you're going to be working on your business rather than in it, is once you have a full understanding of what your business looks like. And I think Michelle even says that that's really when she became a serious business owner, was when she had that understanding.
Yeah, no, you're right. And of course, you're referring to Scott Regan's episode, who we had a few weeks ago, who came in, had great knowledge, and ended up finding himself in the first couple of years doing that technical work and almost getting overwhelmed by the business, because he was doing more what rather than how. And such a powerful concept there. And, Michelle talked about, she loved helping people, and she started hiring teammates, and it drove her into debt, because she did not understand the numbers behind the business and didn't have the financial rigor. And she learned, it's okay to charge people for your work because it helps you help more people. That's another catchphrase quote she has that I love. And, that concept of personal liquidity wove through that, which is work we do a lot with people. When you can have that sound financial business plan and that sound liquidity plan for yourself, liquidity gives you options. Liquidity gives you freedom to not be, put into a box and hijacked by your business.
Right. Exactly. Well, and, liquidity helps you manage for those inevitable disruptions that you have. If you don't have liquidity, when those disruptions hit you, you're going to be forced to do something rather than maybe having more options that you could have given yourself had you managed your money correctly.
Yeah. And you heard Michelle talk about how her industry is being disrupted, self-publishing as we speak, moving from not just about publishing a book, but the whole marketing infrastructure after it, right? And helping you tell your story in this competitive world. And, she talked about it with confidence now being disrupted, because she's managed the personal liquidity side. As opposed to, I think, those first couple of years, that might have wiped her out. So such a key insight there. And there's an element too, we talked about personal liquidity, but there's also that financial independence. And we often talk to people about, thinking about your exit in a business and when is the right way to do that. Michelle makes a great point. The business is going to go beyond you at some point, right? And that means thinking about exit. That means thinking about what transition and succession looks like. That means, how are you creating a business of sustainable value? Going back to the how rather than the what. And just such a key, neat concept there. Final thing I thought we'd highlight is just the importance of telling your story. And why is that important for a business owner?
Yeah, Michelle really outlines two things that really make writing a story so helpful for business owners. And that first is that it personalizes what you're doing in the business. It makes you a human, and it makes people want to connect with you. Michelle always says, another one of her catchphrases, people like to do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And a book is the easiest way for people to start knowing you, liking you, and trusting you. So it's really helpful. And then that second is, it instantly gives you authority in when you write a book about something.
Yeah.
You automatically have that. And so, those 2 points are so important for why you would want to write a book.
Yeah, and it works across all industries, as she talked
Mhm.
about, right? Yeah, I thought maybe at first, maybe certain industries would
Right.
gravitate to, but she's a wonderful example of a carpet
Mhm.
industry. And she says, do it sooner rather than later.
Right.
And that actually makes some sense, because when I think about an entrepreneur writing their book, I often think of them as they're writing their memoirs.
Mhm.
Well, that doesn't help you as a business owner connect with your audience. And if you're looking at this as a tool, as a differentiator,
Mhm.
do it sooner, right?
Yeah.
While you're building your business and while you're showing your expertise. It's such a cool way to a cool way to market and tell your story. So,
Right.
love that part of the segment of the program too. Well, we hope you enjoyed those 3 points. There were a lot of other things in here too that are just great to hear. As usual, Michelle just tells a great story and is motivating and enlightening.
Yep.
So we thank Michelle for joining us, and Claudia, thanks for joining me in studio. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.